Hi, this is Danny Doyle, and I am here with another patented hashtag not a tier list, hashtag ranking, hashtag whatever you want to call it. Um, I am ranking on a tier, or in a tier format, the viability of the Fire Emblem Awakening cast in a 0% growth context. And this is both based on my experience playing with them, theory crafting playing with them, and as it's been a couple of months since I actually did my playthrough, I got kind of sloppy and just didn't make a tier list afterwards. It's also based on what I've seen other people do with them, because I've watched a few other 0% growth playthroughs of Awakening, including on Lunatic, and I've seen some cool stuff, some of which I knew was theoretically possible, and some of which I wouldn't have thought of. So when necessary, I will sort of point to, that's something you can do. Let's dive into it. Chrom. Chrom is an interesting one, because he's kind of bad. Like, in the early game, he's decent, but, so is everyone who's available for the first 2 or 3 chapters. And when I say decent, I mean, like, bad, but you need everyone. All of the early game characters in Awakening and 0% growth are pretty bad. But they get credit for existing because, Chrom can't do much, Sully can't do much, Virion can't do much, but together they can kill one enemy. And, you need to kill that one enemy because Frederick can't kill everyone without Chrom and Robin dying. Or Lissa dying, or something like that. So he gets some credit for the early game availability, and you literally need him in order to beat the game, because 0% growth Robin is not going to... Well, I guess theoretically 0% growth Robin could kill Valbar in the Dragon's Table map, but it's much easier for Chrom to do it. Promoted Chrom has better stats than promoted Robin, and is more likely to have the rank for Killing Edge, which is what I ended up going with. And I went with Killing Edge because I specifically wanted to hand that over. I didn't want to just make a Tome Forge for Robin and, I guess give it to Anna, but that wouldn't be helpful at that point in the game. I wanted either to make an axe or a sword, and there wasn't really a feasible way to make Robin able to use axes and swords, or at least not at a rank where they could be killer. So Chrom was just sort of the natural conclusion to that. I needed either an axe for Basilio or a sword for Flavia. I guess I could have gone with an axe for Flavia as well, but the overlap of swords and swords meant that Chrom was basically the necessary choice for killing Valbar. I think he gets some credit for that, and his early game availability, and Falchion in the Rickon map. What is that, chapter 5? Falchion in chapter 5 is pretty good. Rapier access is pretty good. Of the early game units, yeah, he's frail, but he can deal a decent chunk of damage with effective damage. So yeah, we'll put him at B tier. I might move him down if there are other units, but look at this squad. It's the Scrub Squad is the entire cast. I think B is probably, if you stand out in a way that makes me think you have utility beyond just existing in the early game, I think that's a B rank thing. Speaking of B rank, that's also where I'm going to put Robin, because I think, actually, she might be A rank, because her early game is phenomenal. And her late game, she transitions from being a magical unit, having 1-2 range. She has 1-2 range from the get-go, which is really, really good because they're all route maps. The first 3 maps are all route maps, right? And then once you get out of the route maps, there's it's technically a kill boss, but you gotta kill a bunch of enemies to get to him. And then it's another route map. Like, a lot of the early game is route maps. You sort of transition from route map to kill boss in the mid game, and then back to route map in the end game. And so Robin having 1-2 range just lets her take on a bunch of enemies on enemy phase and route the maps faster. She also hits on resistance. And once she sort of gets outclassed, it's easier to train her than train Chrom. Even though she needs more babying and needs more like kills set up for her, she can do so without retaliation. And she can do so hitting on resistance, which tends to generally be easier to find a low res enemy than a low defense enemy. And the payoff is Rally Spectrum, which is literally necessary to kill Grima. And probably the most helpful skill in the game. I got it really late, but I still think that's worth A tier. Like, the contributions in the early game and the contributions in the late game, I feel like are both better than Chrom's. Lissa's a staffer who exists in the early game. I think D tier is where she goes. Let me just go ahead and pause real quick to fix my layout, however. Alright, I've adjusted it. I don't know if fixed is the right word, but let's talk about Lissa. There's not much to say. She's a staffer in the early game, and then you drop her because her magic is crap, and so she's not really good at staffing after the early game. Staffing, like healing, is pretty important in 0% growths, much more so than in a growth context, because your units are going to be taking more damage and have lower HP. But even so, I don't think Lissa deserves a spot. I guess C tier. Because she's not exactly replaceable. I guess C tier, probably, because she's not exactly, like, for the next couple we're going to talk about, well, other than Frederick, obviously, they're pretty interchangeable, a lot of them. Like, their job is to do damage, and they do some damage. Lissa's kind of irreplaceable as healer for the first few chapters. Once you get Mirabelle, you know, she's better slightly, I guess. Still not great, but she has more move. You're probably going to use both of them, because healing is very important in 0% growths. But yeah, I think she can't transition to Rescuer like you would normally have her do in a growths context, because her magic is just so garbage. If you wanted to use her, of course. I will say, one bit of utility she does have in 0% growths, if you want, is becoming a Pegasus, so she can airdrop people. You can use the second seal on her, turn her into a Pegasus, and she can second seal people, or she can airdrop people, which is really helpful because there's a lot of desert chapters in the early game. And you have access to Sumia, and you have access to Cordelia, and you have access to Wyvern Pan, and a bunch of people can reclass into Wyverns. But, you know, it's something she can do as well by reclassing into a Pegasus. So I wanted to highlight that. Frederick? I'm going to go ahead and put Frederick into S tier because I legitimately do not think the early game would be doable without him. Robin really carried a lot of my early game, but she carried it because Frederick was able to make the rest of the maps, easier on his own. Like, I would not have been able to feed all of those kills to Robin if Frederick wasn't around to just sort of shrug off everything. No surprise that in a 0% growths game, the Jagan is S tier. He has the option of reclassing to a Wyvern, like everyone else does. If you get him to 10, you can make him Wyvern Lord, so he has more movement than like Lissa or Virion or Sully or all the other people who can be flyers are. But yeah, just as a Great Knight, he's phenomenal. As a pair-up bot, he's phenomenal. The fact that you get that for free, so you don't have to train either of your Cavaliers, who are kind of trash in general, but especially in 0% growths. And so you don't have to sacrifice Kellum's ability to rally defense if you make him a Great Knight instead. I think that Frederick is really the only free... Like, you're trading something. You're either trading experience that could go into better units if you make the Cavs Great Knights, and Great Knight is a great pair-up class. Or you're trading rally defense, because you can't get both. You really can't get both. So yeah, Frederick's great. Frederick is great, and his stats are phenomenal in the early game. Obviously, you know, falls off, quote unquote, but still viable in like the mid game at combat. And once he's not viable at combat or less viable at combat, makes a phenomenal backpack for free because, you know, great knives give plus movement and boost physical stats. I think both bulk and attack, but I'm not 100% certain and I'm not going to look it up. Very, very quickly, these three are all D tier. I guess I can put Virion in F tier because if he's not F tier, who is? I can think of a couple of people. But yeah, D and F, like they're roughly interchangeable. Virion worse through is he worse because he has bows? Because he doesn't get retaliated against, which is actually like a good niche. It's sort of what makes Robin phenomenal, is like she doesn't get retaliated against. There's other reasons, obviously, she's phenomenal, but like being able to attack without retaliation is nice. So you could argue he belongs in D tier, but he's also just like statistically awful, even if he wasn't an archer. It's a nice niche, and I think it puts him at the top of F tier, because there are some others who are gonna end up in F tier. It's a nice niche that Virion has. But yeah, all three of these are, like I was talking about, they get credit for existing in the early game. I'm not gonna dive too deep into them, because they're pretty similar in the regard of just, they exist, they do damage, it's another body. It's a body for the meat grinder. You know, you don't have, like, I'm not going to dive into too much about what makes the calves different from each other and what makes Virion different from them, other than, you know, he can't enemy phase, but he can attack without retaliation. And, you know, it's a nice trade-off, but he's statistically just so much weaker that I do think he belongs in F tier. And he also can't do what they do in terms of, like, their movement can allow you to sort of like pair up to give, like, they don't give movement on pair up, but if you put a backpack, if you want someone to be able to make it far, right, you give them a backpack and then have them move and switch, and now their backpack is the front pack, if that makes any sense. Speaking of backpacks, Virion, Vike, don't insult Vike like that. Vike, who sort of teaches you about backpack units, is at least B tier? I would say B tier, above Crom. He is phenomenal combat unit in the early game. I would say, rather than sort of interchangeable, his access to axes and his just respectable physical strength stats, and just physical bulk too, he's surprisingly bulky, are really, really good. He can get rally strength, which was really helpful. He can get bow access, which is pretty helpful because, much like I said with Virion, like, the ability to attack at 2 range is good. The ability to deal effective damage to wyverns is really good. If you're dealing damage, which Virion isn't, but Vike is. The ability to counter at 2 range if you need to counter someone, like over a wall, counter another archer. And the fact that he's not locked to them. Because since he's not locked to them, he doesn't get the downside of not being able to enemy phase. You can trade bows off of him, which I did at many times. Or trade bows onto him, which I did sometimes. So Vike, definitely high B tier, probably the very top of B tier, just because Rally, like, once he stopped being a combat carry, and he was a combat carry for quite a while, I think most of the early game, he suddenly becomes a rally bot, and that was insanely helpful because you need to rally in order to reach benchmarks that your units are not going to reach otherwise. Muriel is like Robin, but worse. She hits at 1-2 range, hits on resistance. I think that she is probably above Lissa, because she's similar to Stahl and Sully, except for that she's similar to Lissa, more so. That she's like Stahl and Sully and Virion, but she can't be replaced by someone else. Like, Stahl could be replaced by Sully could be replaced by Stahl. Obviously, they're better if you have both of them, but if one dies, you're not going to care too much. But Muriel hits on resistance. Like, she's weaker Robin, but weaker Robin is still better than the flunkies down here. Hits on resistance, hits on 1-2 range, and eventually becomes a rally bot like Robin. Her rally is worse. It is rally magic. It's strictly worse, but you get it earlier. So she gets credit for that, because rally magic is, like, it's good for rescue. And when you promote her, she can be a decent filler rescue for rescue chains as well. She's better as a rally bot for rescue chains, but if you need to, you can use her. Obviously her husband and her son were better than that, but we will get to them when we get to them. But yeah, I do think she belongs in C tier, because she has a niche after her combat no longer becomes necessary, and her combat is better than the DNF tiers. I don't think it's enough to break into B tier, because while Rally Magic and Rescue are really good, there are a lot of people who can Rally Magic and Rescue, and, like, she's still replaceable. She's just not replaceable the first chapter you get her. And also, there's more demand for a bunch of rescuers, as opposed to a bunch of people who deal 2 damage. Sumia, good backpack, good flying transporter. Like, the speed, I really want to put her in D tier, because she feels, combat-wise, very, very similar to Stalin Sully. But the speed from pair up, and the fact that she can not quite, it's like rescue dropping. It's not rescue dropping, but it's like rescue dropping if you make her the lead and then switch and let the backpack move. I think that pushes her to the very bottom of C tier. In fact, is that better than a heal staff? I guess theoretically, you could train her enough to get rally speed. Is that better? Because you have to invest in her a lot, whereas you don't have to invest in Lissa for the heal staff. I'm going to keep her at the bottom of C tier, both because I think that the investment for rally speed is so much that you probably just discount it, and I think that the speed boost from pair up is less valuable than being your only healer or one of your only 2 healers for a bunch of chapters. Like, there's a bunch of chapters where she's the only healer, and then there's a bunch where she's the only one of 2. And I think that pushes Lissa over. I also think people who like Sumia are going to get mad at me for this, and that leads to comments, and comments lead to the algorithm liking you. And then you get noticed, unlike Kellum. Nice transition. Kellum is B tier. I would say he is worse than Vake, because he fulfills a very similar role. He is a big ball of stats in the early game, who promotes and becomes a rally bot in the late game. His rally defense is less valuable than Vake's, because rally strength can be used for kill boss maps, and rally defense really can't. Oftentimes, Vake's purpose rallying strength is just to push my boss killer over the kill threshold, and then get through the map in 1 turn. Kellum is helpful on route maps, and on boss kill maps where I need to do a couple of things beforehand. Like, the biggest example I can think of is the Mire Mage map. I think that's 21, Fire Emblem. The chapter name is Fire Emblem. Is a big map for Kellum, because even though it's boss kill, it's hard to get down to the boss early, so you still need to do a bunch of combat, and that requires rallies. So Kellum's rally was useful there, but in general, less useful because rally defense is just a worse rally. Otherwise, they're basically identical. Vake gets about a half a chapter of availability on Kellum, because even though Vake has a full chapter ahead of him, for the first turn or 2 of that chapter, he does not have a weapon. I guess that's not half a chapter, 3/4 of a chapter more than Kellum, but like, their availability is very close to each other regardless. It's less than a chapter's difference. Really, the only thing pushing them apart, in my opinion, is the difference in the utility of the rallies, and how I would, like, gun to my head, I want rally strength over rally defense. Well, in that scenario, I want rally defense because it might make me not die from bullet. But you know. Donald, F tier, worst unit in the game. He's a growths unit in 0% growths. Like, I don't need to say anything more. Do I? No, I don't. Long Q. Long Q is fucking up my format again. So we'll put him here, and I'll pause, and then I'll explain why I have him there. Okay. He is a C tier unit. I think it's... The availability is the only thing that makes me think Sumiya might be better than him. But he can actually do combat, which she can't. So I think he's higher. He actually might be higher than Lissa as well. He can do combat. He can do combat pretty decently. In fact, probably better than yeah, better than Muriel, I would say, as well. Because she's sort of like... No. I think because of the rallying magic, she ekes it out. But it's close. It's close. So he does combat for a couple of chapters in the mid-game. It's nothing, like, too special and noteworthy. Like, he's outshined by Vake and... He's outshined by Vake. He's outshined by Kellum. He's outshined by probably Pan, if I had to guess, and outshined by Cordelia and Gregor. But Long Q is just like, he's another unit who you can just sort of throw on the front lines. You can also give a speed boost who Vake, in particular, really appreciates a speed boost, because it can push him over some doubling thresholds he didn't meet otherwise. If you want to, even in vanilla, I really like them as sort of like a pair-up for that reason, but especially in 0% growths when, you know, Vake's going to be meeting even fewer doubling thresholds. Swords are also decent at that point in the game. I think there's a lot of axe units, although I might be wrong on that. But he's just a mid unit who falls off because he has no rally potential. And there are other better combat units, or you'd rather have rescue staff units. But I like him. He's kind of disposable once you get... I would say once you get to the Emerin chapter, where Emerin dies, spoilers, he's kind of disposable, and you would be willing to let him die if he died. But, I think he's fine. You know, filler. Rickon is C tier. Higher magic than Muriel, slightly worse availability, but the higher magic means that he's a better rescue bot. Than her in almost every way. I think it's only one space difference, but like that one space is a big deal when you're building chains and you have to have like 3 or 4 people chain with each other. That one space is a big deal. It does mean that she is better as a rally bot, but like that's an insult. Like the better you are at being a rally bot for rally magic, that means you're a worse unit as far as a rescuer. It's kind of like saying someone is a good dancer in 3 houses. Just kind of means that they're the worst unit otherwise. His combat is halfway decent. He joins at a point where he's pretty outclassed at the point that he joins, but it is worth training him to level 10 in order to make him a rescue bot or a rally magic bot. And it is also... It's not hard. It's like Robin. It's not hard. Like, he hits on resistance, he hits at 2 range. He's fine at it. Mirabelle? I think it's Muriel. I always get her name confused somehow. I would say she's a D tier unit. She's your second staffer, so the same role as Lissa. You're probably going to deploy both of them. The utility she has over Lissa is that she can move farther, which came up for me exactly once. And it was in a weird spot, too. It came up for me in the chapter where... It's the Deadlords chapter. I think it's just called Deadlords. But in order to get the Deadlord's axe, I had to rescue Anna. And none of my unmounted healers could make it far enough from the starting position I needed her to be in. Because I needed Anna to be in the leftmost position so that she could get rescued. And I needed a... no one other than Muriel could make it, and I couldn't afford a pair-up because I was using all of my deployment slots on rally bots. It was a really weird niche situation, but it does show that tiny extra bit of movement, even on maps where you wouldn't think of the movement of your healers being valuable, is valuable. That said, her availability is pretty crap. Her magic is pretty crap. She's a bad rescue bot. It only came up because I only needed to rescue Anna like 1 or 2 squares total, I believe. I think it was a 3-square rescue because she did get rally magics beforehand as well. Like, she and Anna both did. And that's why I needed her in a specific deployment slot, because she needed to get rallied before moving. And whoever my rescuer was would need to do that. But yeah, it just... That example does highlight the usefulness of being a mounted staffer, because she was unpromoted as well. But that's that. Otherwise, mid-unit. Pawn. I love Pawn. Pawn was ultimately less useful than the Rally Bros, unfortunately. More useful than Chrom, though. She did take some investment, but much like Robin, and to a lesser extent Rickon, the investment, which was mostly for self-improvement, it wasn't difficult, and she was still making progress on the map. It's progress other people could have been making, so I don't know. I don't know how much credit I give her for that, but it's more than 0, and it's definitely not negative, as some people's investment is negative. As a Wyvern, she was decently useful. Again, she became a Wyvern right before a couple of Desert chapters, so that is always nice. Her stats left a lot to be desired. That is to be expected in 0% growths, but still, able to eke out combat. She's in the unfortunate position of right at the point where she became a Wyvern, and therefore at her most useful, was also when we started getting pre-promotes. And that sucks, because they all severely outclassed her. And I think, actually, as I'm talking about it, that actually might be enough to drop her below Chrom. I think she's still a B-tier unit, ultimately, but I do think the fact that it took her longer than I would have wanted to get rolling, and once she did get rolling, pre-promotes were showing up, or level 10 units and Master Seals were showing up, and that feels bad, because she was then like a level 1 Wyvern. She was not going to promote on time. So I think we put her in B tier. But I think we still keep her in B tier, but we put her at the very bottom of B tier. Gaius was a... Ooh! Sorry about that. Gaius was a movement pair-up. And that's it. It's valuable enough for C tier, but in my opinion, not much more. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got to say about him. Cordelia. Cordelia was a flyer who joins Poi Desert maps, so as I talked about with Pawn, and as I talked about briefly with Sumia, that's incredibly useful. And the fact that she can do combat was also incredibly useful, and that came for free. Which puts her above Pawn, because Pawn needed investment. And I also think Pawn missed part of the first Desert chapter as a flyer. So yeah, Cordelia, it shows up for free. Cordelia also became a Rally Speed bot in the mid-game. And Rally Speed was very important, both for boss kills to ensure doubling, and for route maps in order to ensure not getting doubled or doubling. Rally Speed was probably the most useful rally outside of Rally... so obviously Rally Spectrum's the best, right? I think Rally Magic is actually probably better than Rally Speed, but Rally Speed is a niche because so many units get Rally Magic. Holy shit, there's a lot of... I've already covered 2, but then we're about to jump into, a bunch of people who either have it inherently, have the option to get it, or... Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, Cordelia's good, though. Cordelia was really good. Not better than these two because their availability, I think, is a point in their favor. But better than Crom, better than Pawn. Gregor. Gregor is combat-wise better than Cordelia. He has rally skill, which is a theoretically helpful rally, but it is never necessary. It just makes soft resetting less frequent. Better than Pawn, because he starts out as a pre-promote, or, starts out level 10, and in a chapter where you get a Master Seal. I think of him as a pre-promote, even though he can function in vanilla as a growth unit. He continued to be combat ready for far longer than you would expect him to. He was combat ready in... he was doing combat in the Tiki map. He was doing combat in the Walhart map. Like, he was amazing. It's always Gregor time. Rally skill is helpful, but never necessary, so I think it's, like, a lower value rally, because it was useful for ensuring, like, Luna and stuff, but I could just reset more times. Now he's F tier. She's F tier. Not as bad as Donald, but she's a growth unit. Like, her big thing is she grows HP. She starts out pretty frail. Like, the Dragonstone boosts are nice, but they're not nice enough to make up for her pretty abysmal stats. I got some use out of her, but not a lot. And, yeah, like, of the two Manicheets, I tend to think, like, Manicheets, they 1-2 range, hit hard, but doesn't hit very hard and gets hit really hard. Like, she crumples so easily with, like, 18 as her HP stat? Oh, I wonder if that's, like, subliminal messaging as well. Like, she is a growth unit because she has guaranteed HP growth, and sometimes she can get 2 stats. So in 0% growth, sorry, honey, you're not cut out for it. Also, feel kind of weird saying honey. I meant it as, like, a child thing, not in the weird way people sexualize her. I'm tempted to put her lower than Donnie because of the fucking gross awakening sexualization. But, Donnie is just very, very bad, so I won't do that. Libra is not very, very bad. Libra is very, very good, in fact. Libra is the first pre-promote, well, other than Freddy, obviously. The first pre-promote you get, and he, for a couple of chapters, his combat is really good, and then he becomes one of your best rescuers. Obviously, Anna is the best rescuer long-term, and part of that was I pumped her full of Spirit Dust, but she also just has better magic than him. Not by much, but some. He has a better staff rank, but rescue is E rank, so it's kind of irrelevant. Like, he can physic if you need him to, which is nice. He can fortify. He can, if you get him all the way up to it, he can do the goddess staff equivalent, and that's always nice on route maps. I think he is our first solid A tier. He's less useful than Robin because he joins later, but I can't overstate being a rescuer with significant range. Like, rescuers with 3 or 4 range are a dime a dozen, or 1 or 2 range are a dime a dozen as well. Being a rescuer with decent range pre-rally magic and even more post-rally magic, that's a nice place to be. And if for some reason I was using Anna in a way that wasn't rescuer, I could have pumped him full of Spirit Dust and made him almost as good as her. Tharja is sort of the definition of a filler combat unit. I gave her one of the early Master Seals, and I'm not sure if that was the right decision, to be honest. I was happy with how it played out, and I thought that having a NOS tank for a couple of important maps, in particular the Seacomers, was a big deal. And it was. It was a big deal in the Seacomers, it was a big deal in the Anna recruitment map, it was a big deal in the map before the Seacomers where you kill Gangrel. It was a pretty big deal. But after that, it kind of just felt like, why did I give you a Master Seal? So C tier? above you. Yeah, I think that's where we want them. Anna is undeniably an S tier character. She is the best rescuer in the game. She is partially, of course, because, I stuffed her full of spirit dust, but partially just really, really good magic. She, with access to, like, Trickster and plus move and all those fun skills, is also a decent combat unit in her own right. It becomes less reliable in the late game because she relies on dodging for tanking, but she hits on resistance, like she's Robin, but better. Never gets rally magic, or never gets rally spectrum, never gets any rallies. Well, she gets rally magic, but like, why are you using rally magic as Anna instead of on Anna? She's your best rescuer. And I will fix my format while you gush over how fucking incredible Anna is. She really is phenomenal. She really is phenomenal. It is, it's like, I could sit here all day and just be like, she has a long rescue range. She has a long rescue range. She has a long rescue range. But like, that's all, that would be the entire video. And I think we want to talk about another S tier unit. We're knocking out A and S tier now. Like, I saved them for the people who joined in the mid game, because the people who joined in the mid game are cracked. As much as I really value availability, and that's why Vake and Kellum are as high as they are, but the mid game squad is something else. Another member of the mid game squad, Olivia, also S tier. I would say, yeah, better than Freddy and Anna. She's not the best unit in the game for a 0% growth playthrough, but she's one of the best. I initially believed that dancers in Awakening were at their worst because they're kind of hard to keep safe. There's a lot of ambush spawns, and often, even if I'm playing like a route map, I would often get off a single dance and then hide her in someone's backpack. However, there are so many, because you have so many tools like rescue, like buyable rescue, pair up and whatnot, being able to dance someone is more valuable because it has a significantly higher potential impact. If you can dance someone who's like a rescuer or whatever, or rescue Olivia and then dance. Well, you can rescue Olivia or you can rescue Olivia, dance the rescuer, and rescue someone else is the first option, like farther down the road, which I did a few times. You can also move someone, dance them, rescue them, and then move them again, which I did a couple of times. You can put Olivia in someone's backpack, rescue them, or move them, and then switch and have her dance, which I did a few times. There's just a lot of things you can do with your tools and in order to enhance Olivia, and also allow those tools to move again. Allow a rescuer to move again. Allow a 13 move flyer to move again. And because of the large number of maps that are kill boss, and so therefore have a single critical turn for a clear, especially in 0% growths, the fact that you can double up on whoever your best unit's action is for that single critical turn, or in some cases, there's a couple of maps that have 2 or 3 critical turns. The Tiki Paralog is a big one that had a couple of critical turns. That I had to do a bunch in 2 turns, and Olivia was a big deal in that. Even like Dragon's Table, Olivia was a big deal in, like, doing stuff almost every turn, giving me more actions. And it's easier to keep her safe too, because once you know where the ambush spawns are, you have more tools to like have her run out in danger, dance someone who's in danger, and then rescue her out of danger, because rescue is buyable. So I do think dancers are sort of at their best they're not at their very best, because I think they're probably at their best in like 3 houses where you have even more tools. But it's one of the best instances in the 3DS games. I think dancers only get better as time goes on because the games add more features and therefore you can have more of an impact with dancing. You know, in the early games, you could sort of just, dance your combat unit, but now you can dance a rescuer, dance a parabot, dance whoever you want to dance. It's always nice. It's always nice. Best unit in the playthrough, and in my opinion, the best unit for 0% growths is Cherche. Cherche is incredible. Much like Anna, I could sit here all day and just say Cherche kills bosses over and over and over, and I would not have said it enough times. But she has stats that are just good enough. And in a normal playthrough, stats that are just good enough in Awakening is trash. Like, in a normal playthrough, she is like a D tier unit. She joins pretty late, and her stats are just good enough. But in 0% growths, and in particular in 0% growths when I'm using all of the bonus box items, I can pump her full of stat boosters, and not all of them are from the bonus box, just one of each is from the bonus box. But I can pump her full of stat boosters. I can slap Deliverer, which is an amazing skill on her. I can give her the best pair-up in the game in Freddy, and they have an S support option, which is something the other potential carries don't have. And I can have her just whack her way through all of the bosses in the game. And that just the fact that she is just good enough makes her amazing. Yeah, she's a flyer with stats that are decent. And for some reason, that's rare. Henry is basically Tharja with slightly better stats and slightly worse join time. Actually, I would say significantly worse join time, because Tharja's usefulness was mostly in chapters before he joined. So I'd actually throw him in the D tier with these scrubs. He can be right under Tharja, because they do fulfill, like, the Nos tank role, but Tharja's usefulness was basically in... There were a couple of chapters after Henry joined where both of them were useful, but there was never a chapter where I was like, I'm only deploying Tharja and I wish it was Henry. Like, she was good in the Seacomers. She was good in a few chapters, but like, her usefulness kind of falls off a cliff pretty quickly, and it's like, again, he's a unit who is set up for route maps, and he joins after most of the route maps of the early game are over. There's like one route map coming up after he joins. It's the one where you get Cyree, but that's the only route map after he joins, and he's not a useful boss killer. He's like made for enemy phase because of Nosferatu. Speaking of the map where Cyree joins, let's talk about Cyree. Cyree is another potential carry. I obviously use Cherche as a carry. I think Cyree is the worst potential carry. She has a number of qualities that make her worse than Cherche, in my opinion. While Cherche has innate access to a flyer class and therefore can promote and remain as a flyer, if Cyree wants to be a flyer, she does have access to Pegasus and Wyvern. However, she needs to use a second seal to get them, which means she's going to be stuck as an unpromoted class until she gets to level 10. Because, she's moving from Swordsmaster, a level 1 Swordsmaster, to a new class. So she can only access unpromoted classes with the second seal, unless she gets to level 10 as a Swordsmaster. Additionally, if she becomes a Wyvern or a Pegasus, she's going to have E rank, which is pretty damning at that point in the game. You're not going to be an effective boss killer. So you probably want her to remain as a Swordmaster, and maybe reclass once you reach level 10 as a Swordmaster. But then that means you have to do quite a few maps as a Swordmaster. And the one where she joins is a route map, so you can get her a lot of experience in that. But the military is a map that really rewards having a flyer. And so You can pair her up with a flyer, but she's not going to be making it over there on her own. So you can't give her Frederick, who's the best pair-up bot in the game. Speaking of pair-ups, she can only support Robin. So if you want an S support, you have to go male Robin, which means you can't S support Crom as well. And if you give her Robin as a backpack, then it makes it harder to train Robin for Rally Spectrum. So you're probably sacrificing that. While Robin does have access to any classes, so she can become, like, sort of substitute Frederick as a Great Knight, it requires 20 levels to do that, because you have to spend 10 levels in Tactician, second seal into Cavalier, and then spend 10 more levels in Cavalier before you promote into Great Knight. Or I guess you could do the same as Armor Knight, but the point remains, it's 20 levels to get there. So you're still investing in Robin as much as you would be investing in her, almost as much as you would be investing in her for Rally Spectrum, but the payoff is just discount Frederick for Cyree specifically. So it's pretty bad. She does, however, have Assassin access, which is something that the other potential carries in Cherche and Anna do not have. Like, as Anna does. But Anna doesn't want to be a non-magical class. The downside, of course, or the upside of that being, of course, lethality is the best boss kill if you're willing to reset over and over and over. And I have seen people get boss kills with lethality in 0% growths, which is really nice. It means you can save money on forges as well, because you really only have to worry about hitting and proccing lethality. But she shows up much later and takes even longer to get going than Cherche would. And I think the results are basically... they're not improved over Cherche. I would argue they're not equivalent as well, that the lethality kills are kind of gimmicky, but they are cool. And it is something you can do, and especially if you remain Swordmaster, which means you don't get lethality, she gets access to a couple of good unique swords, including some 1-2 range. So she doesn't have the inherent downside that most Swordmasters have in that regard. If she goes Assassin, obviously she does get that downside. I think overall, I would put her at C tier. Like, she can be a carry, but she's the worst carry, in my opinion. And it's weird to put someone who, like, theoretically could carry the endgame of your run, but she just shows up so late. That I'd put her, like, lower than Tharja, honestly. Like, she helped out for me, she helped out on a couple of maps, and it was nice. But, she was most helpful as, like, a speed backpack for Tiki. Real quick, because I touched on that, like, Anna could potentially be a carry as well. I think she's also pretty bad at it, because she relies on dodge tanking, and for the route maps, that becomes increasingly unreliable. The upside is you no longer have to give all of your physical stat boosters to Cherche, who would be your carry. You can give them to... you can evenly distribute them on people like Gregor and Cherche and other people who you might want to be, like, combat flunkies, but and you can use them earlier too if you want to, like, use them on Vagan Kellum, I guess, because she only wants magical stat boosters. But I still think it's not great, even if you were to invest everything into her. She's also better as a rescue bot than as a carry, because if you're using her as a carry, then she can't rescue people, and she's the best rescuer in the game. So I do still stand by Cherche being the person you should have holding your run on shoulders. I do recognize that that is a rule Cyree can potentially play, and Cyree might theoretically be better at it for an LTC context because of lethality specifically. Because in a context where if you're LTCing, you often are, like, skipping treasures, you might not have the money to make the forges I made for Cherche. And in that case, relying on Cyree's lethality proc is feasibly the only way to kill a boss in one turn, which is what you want to do as an LTC if you can. I just don't just don't think that makes her a better unit, because again, you have to reset so many times for... Like, I don't think lethality access alone pushes her above the sort of really mid-flunky that she is if you don't fully invest in her and fully go all in to get what is, in my opinion, just a worse boss killer. I did talk about how she can support with Tiki. So I was wrong when I said Robin is her only support option. Tiki is one as well. But if you are going through the trouble of going through the Tiki parallel because it is so hard, it's probably because you want Tiki as an attack unit, because Tiki is everything Naui wishes she was. Tiki is what Naui would be in a Growth playthrough. She's a powerful 1-2 range, gets all the Dragonstone boosts. She's not the tankiest thing in the world, and she doesn't hit the hardest in the world. And she really appreciates that Sairi pair-up for speed and I think skill, but don't quote me on that. I would say she... maybe low B tier? She joins very late, and there's a pretty steep cost to getting her. That cost being you have to do the most obnoxious map in the world. In vanilla, it's obnoxious. In 0% growths, it's unbearable. But I think B is where she belongs. Like, she's pretty powerful. B tier's pretty crowded. I might move these two up to A tier, potentially. I think I'll leave it as is for now, though. I kind of like this. Basilio and Flavia, they are your Grima killers. You can go with either. Basilio is who I chose to go with because Berserker access, and I like him. I really like Basilio. He is one of... He's, again, one of the Awakening makes very fun characters. I know people refer to him as Nick Fury because of the eye patch, and the fact that he's one of the very few Fire Emblem characters that's black. I'll admit I like him for that because diversity is good. Like, he is explicitly black, whereas a lot of the other Fire Emblem black characters are kind of cartoonish. I don't know if that's... He doesn't feel like a stereotype, whereas like Danved feels like a racist caricature. Is I guess what I'm trying to say, and I really like that because I'm a big fan of representation. I'm also a big fan of his angry berserker crit quotes, which are very fun. It's not quite pick a god and pray level, but it's pretty good. Him as a unit, you know, send him through Berserker, or send him through Great Knight. They both have Great Knight access. Send him through Great Knight, though, to get Luna, and then make him a Berserker, and he is really fast. You give him a pair up with Flavia, and just go to town. Flavia can also get Luna going through Great Knight. You really choose one of them to invest in. I would say they're arguably, like, about the same level as each other. So, yeah, I guess it's so weird tiering them because, like, they are much like Chrom. They're absolutely necessary to clear the game, but they have a different problem from Chrom in that, like, they don't really show up until the end. I kind of want to put them in A tier, and that's probably recency bias to an extent. In fact, it's definitely recency bias because there's so much of the game they're not around for. The maps they're around, they're incredibly helpful, though, because they are Goto characters that show up 3 maps early. And I really needed their help on Dragon's Table, and I really needed their help on Awakening. Obviously, To Kill a God is a boss kill map, so I don't even think I deployed them. Although, you know, Basilio can do Vake's job of rally strength, which is nice. But yeah, I think they were so incredibly helpful in maps that are so incredibly difficult. Like, throw the Hellswath onto Basilio as a Great Knight. I'm putting Basilio higher because I like him better as a Grima Killer, personally. But since they can both do the same thing, like, I like Brave Axe better than Brave Sword, personally, because big numbers. But they do the same thing, functionally. I will say this. Basilio gets Brave Axe, or not Brave Axe. Basilio gets Hellswath without using an Arm Scroll, and that's incredibly valuable because Hellswath is 1-2 range and boosts your defense. And I do think that ultimately puts him over Flavia, because you need to get an Arm Scroll for Flavia to make her replicate the same thing, which you can. She can do the same thing as Basilio, but he can do it inherently. And I think if two characters fulfill the same role, but one requires resources and one doesn't, then the one who doesn't require resources is better. That said, they're right next to each other because they are both doing the same thing. But even when Basilio is the one I'm training, Flavia isn't just a para bot. Like, Flavia was putting in work with the eat shit. Flavia was incredible that map. Just, you know, Basilio could do some things that she couldn't as a Great Knight. Lucina, I'm going to put F tier. I never used her, and I never felt the need to. She theoretically, you know, has effective damage against wyverns, but at a point where you don't see that many, and it's mostly kill boss maps, like, she just joins too late to do anything. Which is a shame. Morgan, same deal as Lucina, except for does not have the whole she has Parallel Falchion thing. Like, he gets nothing. He hits on res. Whoop-de-frickin-do. I would not have reset if he died in his joining chapter, because I went to his joining chapter specifically for the item, not for him. It was, yeah, he is, not great. Laurent is Laurent really surprised me. I'm gonna put Laurent lower than Rickon and higher than Muriel, even though Laurent was better than both of them as a rescue bot, simply because he cost the investment of me pairing them together. Which meant that Muriel was taking a deployment slot up for quite a few chapters I didn't want her in, to be honest. Quite a few chapters that I would have rather had other people. That said, once he was born, so to speak, he was the third best rescuer in the game. You know, Anna was the best. Libra, obviously, second best. Laurent was the third. And, unlike Anna, who's never going to use Rally Magic, and Libra, who doesn't learn it, Laurent could Rally Magic as well if I only needed 2 rescuers on a specific map or turn. Which, again, is something that Rickon and Muriel could do as well, but, that would mean I have to deploy them, and I'm, like, I did for a lot of maps, because sometimes Rescuer 4 and 5 were also useful, but, if I'm only bringing 3 rescuers and then also a rally bot, you know, I'm bringing him as the 3rd rescuer, and then Rickon as the rally bot, because if I need to do a 4th rescue, Rickon's better at it. So, yeah, I think he goes right in between his parents, and I think that's a fitting place for him thematically as well, because he's right in between his parents. I didn't get any of the other kids, and I don't think, like, they probably would have been pretty mid. They probably would have been about the same place that Morgan and Lucina are, F tier, because they joined too late to do anything, and while their stats were better than a lot of the units who tiered higher, one, not worth the cost to get them. Like, a lot of those paralogs are so punishing, and a lot of them are not boss kills, so you can't just cheese them. But more importantly, like, they joined too late. Like, yes, they had slightly higher stats than their parents, but like at a time when their parents weren't useful anymore. So that's my list. If you have any questions or suggestions or disagree with anything, you can sue me. You can fucking sue me. Or you can leave a comment. That's also acceptable. But I will either see you in the comment section or I'll see you in court. Bye!